Some sobering numbers are underscoring the grim reality of military suicides. So far this year, at least 354 U.S. service members have killed themselves, according to military statistics. That's more than the 335 killed by enemy fire in Iraq and Afghanistan this year combined.
Former British Prime Minister Tony Blair showing no second-guessing at all about the war. He says he would have supported removing Saddam Hussein from power even if it was known back then that the Iraqi leader did not have weapons of mass destruction.
The government was clearly advised the war would be illegal without a second UN resolution.
Blair's announcement of Iraq's supposed weapons of mass destruction in 2003 was part of what has now become apparent during the inquiry, a premeditated policy by Blair and George W. Bush to remove Saddam. Today, Blair added that he would still have toppled Saddam, but he would have, quote, used and deployed different arguments. He sent 40,000 of his troops to Iraq, 180 of them were killed. All the same, Blair says he thinks we're better off. That BBC interview hasn't gone down very well here in Iraq. Everyday Iraqis say the democracy they've been handed doesn't really serve the people. It only serves the politicians who want to line their pockets. And given the fact that we still have violent incidents and many deaths, exemplified by Tuesday's mass bombings here in Baghdad, some people believe that while Saddam was an oppressor, there still was relative peace here.
Some of these neoconservatives came into office before 9/11 determined to go to war against Iraq.
Well, there's certainly consequence. A $2 trillion war, 5,000 Americans dead who probably deserve something better than, excuse me, we got the intelligence wrong. What they're really saying, and the best case Rove can make, is that they were dupes of Ahmed Shalabi and the Iranians. But we also know that there was a lot of pressure coming from Cheney on the CIA. The yellow cake story was phony. The aluminum tubes were phony. Pat was right. They were looking for a reason to go to war from the very start. And the truth is, Congress never would have approved this war without weapons of mass destruction. They knew that, and they made the case for weapons of mass destruction and silenced dissent on the issue.
Saddam Hussein has spent the better part of this decade and much of his nation's wealth not on providing for the Iraqi people, but on developing nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons.
There should be no doubt Saddam's ability to produce and deliver weapons of mass destruction poses a grave threat to the peace of that region.
I think that it was Valerie Plame who was really ganged up on, and her husband, and he went to Niger, discovered there was no yellow cake, that the whole story was phony. Joe Wilson came back, said it was phony, and they went after him. I don't know what precise role each person played in this. I do know that that administration set off from the beginning, I believe even earlier than September 12th, Pat. I think those plans were underway in the spring, that there were people inside who wanted to urge that. They saw 9/11 as the opportunity to say we have to go after Iraq, and they did it.
On Friday, I ordered our forces to launch a cruise missile attack on the Iraqi Intelligence Service's principal command and control facility in Baghdad. Those missiles were launched this afternoon at 4:22 Eastern Daylight Time.
On the unanimous recommendation of my national security team, including the Vice President, the Secretary of Defense, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Secretary of State, and the National Security Advisor, I have ordered a strong, sustained series of airstrikes against Iraq.
The U.S. government is now investigating whether Blackwater Worldwide tried to bribe Iraqi officials with $1 million. Guards with a security firm were involved in a Baghdad shooting in 2007 that killed 17 Iraqis. The New York Times reported today the Justice Department has focused on whether Blackwater authorized bribes to continue operating in Iraq.
Is a shadow surge in Afghanistan more significant than President Obama's announced surge in U.S. troops? America may be sending 30,000 soldiers to the war-torn region, but in their wake comes that shadow of around 56,000 contractors, according to a congressional agency report. And not everyone's happy about the often questionable role these independent companies have. More private contractors in Afghanistan than actual soldiers, and the numbers expected to rise with the extra troops that President Obama is sending. Are you surprised?
Unfortunately, I'm not surprised. I mean, what we're seeing right now is the Obama administration not only sort of equaling the Bush-era privatization of war, but actually surpassing it. The total number of contractors, and I've talked to congressional sources that say that this is conservative, but the total number of contractors in Afghanistan right now numbers about 121,000 alongside 68,000 U.S. troops. So this is looking a lot like the Obama administration's job program for the benefit of large war corporations like the one that Mr. Zakheim works for, which is basically a parallel CIA. The sort of dirty public secret in Washington is that these private sector forces are necessary to the Obama administration's policies in both Iraq and Afghanistan. What is particularly disturbing is that in just the past several months, the Obama administration has doubled the number of so-called security contractors, armed contractors like those that work for Blackwater, Triple Canopy, and DynCorp. Blackwater, despite all of the scandals, the investigations, the indictments, continues to work for the State Department, the CIA, and the Pentagon in Afghanistan, and is continuing to bid on huge counter-narcotics contracts in Afghanistan. If there was ever a company that begged for some kind of oversight or intervention, it's Blackwater, and instead they just keep winning huge contracts.
A total of 31 Americans died in Afghanistan last month. That's double the number in January of last year. In all, 978 U.S. service members have been killed since the Afghan war began in 2001.
And while Blackwater has had trouble in Iraq, they remain on the ground in Iraq as well under an aviation contract with the Obama administration that's been extended indefinitely.
Startling allegations this morning from a military attorney who represented an inmate at Guantanamo Bay. She says to get information, her client was tortured. And she calls waterboarding just the tip of the iceberg.
Government documents show 28 CIA detainees were subjected to harsh interrogation techniques. But a military attorney for one detainee who was freed from Guantanamo told us in her first on-camera interview in the U.S. she believes there may be more, and we should warn our viewers, some of what you're about to hear is graphic.
What you're saying is that waterboarding is only the beginning.
Absolutely. It's the tip of the iceberg. In Morocco, he also reported that they started this monthly treatment where they would come in with a scalpel or a razor type of instrument and slash his genitals just with small cuts. There's no reliable evidence that Mr. Muhammad was going to do anything to the United States.
Yvonne Bradley believes there are other former and current detainees on the same journey.
You feel comfortable saying that in a U.S. military uniform?
I do, because I raise my hand to protect the Constitution of the United States. This has nothing to do about national security. It has to do with national embarrassment.
The Senate also released documents Tuesday confirming the U.S. military hid the locations of some prisoners from the International Committee of the Red Cross in order to cover up the torture of prisoners.
They'll make up one lie after another. And if you believe these people, knock yourself out. I don't believe a word they say.